They turned my sister into a brand and called it love. And when I said it was killing her, they told me I was jealous, right up until the night I carried her out before her heart gave out. My mother is allergic to humility and addicted to attention. Work? Not her thing. Spotlight? Inject it. When the kid influencer boom hit, slime bowls, prank channels, toy unboxings, she saw a lottery ticket and stamped our faces on it. I was 10. My sister, Zara, 11. Our studio was a rusted trailer pitched on dirt that turned to soup in the rain. But inside? Cameras. Everywhere. She called them security. We knew better. They watched us eat, nap, laugh, cry. They watched us exist. The new family plan started at breakfast. Mass gainer shakes that tasted like melted chalk. Burgers to chase them. Fries as a reward. At first it felt like a joke. Then it became the rule. Eat big, act bigger, and the views will come. Mom filmed Zara rolling down our weed-choked slope, filmed her accidentally knocking over swings, filmed the staged pranks that always ended in food. She captioned everything with syrup and humiliation. The algorithm was pleased. It clapped. It fed. Zara's numbers climbed. Mine lagged. Mom decided she'd found her star. You are the best daughter a mother could ask for, she cooed to Zara after a video hit 500,000 views, loud enough for the microphone to love her, the comments to praise her, and me to hear every word. Then she dropped the dagger. I'm so glad you're not like your freeloader sister who can't make me happy for tea. She said tea, but she meant camera. It stung, sure. But more than hurt, I felt a gnawing fear for Zara. Because I could still tell where my body ended and the lens began. Zara, not so much. She'd drink those shakes like medicine, like worship. She'd swallow and smile and promise Mom, I'll do better. By 12, Zara's measurements became content. By 13, they became commandment. Mom tracked everything, angles that performed, foods that converted, outfits that popped. I watched my sister learn to gauge her worth by a watch time graph. She'd refresh stats like prayer. She'd wait for praise like oxygen. Me? I slipped sideways, away from the binge for views treadmill and into something like normalcy. Smaller portions. Long walks to the one tree at the edge of the lot. I'd push my plate away and say, I'm full, like a spell I hoped might wake Zara up. Sometimes I'd stand in her doorway and talk too brightly about privacy. How nice it felt to breathe without a lens. How I slept better with my phone turned off. She'd listen with that polite nod she used for brand calls. Then she'd tilt her head and ask if I'd considered light lipo for symmetry. Mom says the camera adds 10, she'd shrug. By 15, the fat girl trend rotted. The internet chased a new flavor. Mom switched scripts without blinking. Out went the binge clips. In came beauty. Slice and bleach and fill. Party to celebrate Zara's fresh start, not a birthday, not a graduation, just a ribbon cutting for her new body. Mom toasted to discipline while Zara's lips bled into her napkin. I was 13 and starving for approval. I let them plump my mouth with filler. I cut my meals to one a day. Mom squeezed my shoulder, said, good girl, and drifted back to Zara's ring light. I understood then affection wasn't for daughters. It was for deliverables. Outside our bubble, I stopped being myself. I became Zara's sister. Guys approached just to say Zara had turned them down. Did I want a pity date? New friends asked thoughtful questions and then, weeks later, shyly wondered if I could maybe get them on a Zara livestream just for fun. I'd try to hang with my sister and she'd hand me a vision board. Hair plan, nose plan, waist plan, follower plan. It was like trying to talk to a TV. At 17, I left. New city, new handle, new rules. Eat when hungry, stop when full, body as home, but not a brand. Jamestown, Tennessee. Cheap apartment, second-hand rug, quiet windows. My shoulders unclenched. I slept. I laughed. I stopped checking corners for lights. Sometimes late, I'd peek at Zara's pages. Still millions. Still love bomb comments. And then, 1 week, silence. No new posts. No stories. Nothing. Thanksgiving pulled me home like a bad tide. Mom opened the door and slapped me. Hard enough to flash stars. You fat pig, she hissed. How could you let yourself go? I pushed past her and called for Zara. Mom rolled her eyes. Zara, show your sister what you've been working on. I heard it then. The sound. Not a cough. Not a cry. The brutal heaving of a body trying to disappear itself. I ran to the bathroom. Zara crouched over the toilet, fingers down her throat, eyes vacant and wet. Her skin looked bruise-thin, stretched over bone. I knelt, lifted her gently, wiped her mouth. She weighed almost nothing. Mom says I can't post until I'm beautiful again, she whispered. I could smell mint and bile. I wanted to scream. Zara's bedroom had morphed from set to cell. Post-its scabbed the walls, calorie counts, cardio targets, punishment tallies. A decimal precision scale sulked in the corner. 00 clothes still tagged, lined up like trophies. Tape on the floor to mark best angles. Charts circling waist, hips, thighs in red. Who circles a child's body like a crime? My mother. I tried to get Mom to listen. She looks exhausted. She needs a doctor. Mom laughed without humor. Zara is disciplined. You are lazy. Don't you dare say those words in my house. The words were eating disorder. When I said them, her mug cracked against the counter. Zara is an artist. Her body is her canvas. Canvas. Not child. That night I called Marcus, my friend from school who was interning at a psych clinic. He didn't soft pedal it. She needs medical care now. If Mom won't allow it, document everything. So I did. The purge bathroom. The post-its. The contracts signed by Mom for management. The brand DMs where Mom replied as Zara. The locked from outside bathroom door. I found Zara's phone in Mom's room. Mom controlled every app, every DM, every post schedule. Zara was a product with a password. Before I left town, I slipped Zara a cheap prepaid phone tucked inside our old stuffed lion. I whispered, call anytime. Mom hovered like a hawk. Zara nodded. I drove back to Tennessee with a stomach full of rocks. 3 weeks later, at 2:03 a.m., a text pinged the dark. One word. Help. I called. No answer. Called again. Nothing. I threw clothes in a bag and drove 4 hours on adrenaline and dread, pulling up near dawn. The yard was a graveyard of empty bottles. The garden where Zara once rolled for laughs had grown wild and mean. I tossed pebbles at her window like we were kids again. The curtain shifted. The pale oval of her face appeared. A finger weight. 5 minutes later, she slipped out the back door in an oversized hoodie that made her look like a ghost inside a sheet. What happened? I whispered, hugging her carefully. She felt bird fragile. She told me about the punishment. Mom had found hidden food. Locked Zara in the bathroom with laxatives and diet pills for a day. Took her phone. Zara had used Mom's while Mom was passed out drunk to text me. I asked her to leave with me right then. She shook her head. Mom had all the money. All the access. If I go, she'll say I'm on drugs. She'll ruin me. No one will believe me. That's the thing about abusers. They don't just take your resources. They take your credibility. We heard movement. Zara squeezed my hand and vanished back inside. I stood there shaking with helpless rage, then checked into a motel and started making lists. I called my professors, family emergency. I researched adult protective services and found a lot of resources that weren't built for someone like Zara. The next day, Tuesday, grocery day, always Tuesday, I slipped back in while Mom was out. We moved like thieves in our own house. We grabbed Zara's ID, birth certificate, social security card, still hidden in our shared stuffed lion, because Mom never found that hiding place. I took photos of contracts that handed Mom complete control. Zara showed me her journal. I read page after page of punishments and pills and weigh-ins and the way Mom called hunger, proof you're serious. I begged her to come with me. She couldn't. So we built a quiet lifeline. Notes tucked beneath the loose floorboard. Scheduled check-ins on the prepaid phone. I brought sandwiches and watched my sister learn to eat again. Small bites, long pauses, guilt like a shadow. Hunger pains are weakness leaving the body, she admitted Mom would say. I wanted to set the house on fire. For a while, hope arrived as folded paper. Kept food down. Stood up to Mom once. Drank water without counting sips. Then hope went silent. No new note? Old one's gone. Calls to the prepaid rang to nowhere. The next time I came by, I knocked. Mom opened the door wearing that plastic smile that meant she'd already decided what story she was going to sell me. Zara's focusing on her comeback, she said, showing me a fresh post. Perfect photo. Glowing caption. A lie. I pushed past her. She clawed my arm hard enough to raise welts. I saw the bathroom door latched from the outside again. I tore the latch off. Zara was inside, gray and shaking. I gained 1/2 pound, she whispered, and it sounded like a death sentence she'd written for herself. I didn't ask permission. I took her hand. We ran. Mom followed, recording like it was content. Family drama, she crowed for an audience that wasn't there. She pounded the hood as I started the car. She's nothing without me, she screamed. Zara flinched like the words were bullets she'd been trained to absorb. I drove to the hospital. I didn't slow for anything. The ER nurse looked at Zara and stopped using her calm voice. She moved. Vitals. 4. Labs. Later, the doctor used words that made my knees go water: organ strain, severe dehydration, risk window, refeeding syndrome. If you'd waited a few days, he said gently, she might not have made it. I nodded until my neck hurt. Then I made phone calls. Ms. Patel, the only adult from our past who had ever looked us in the eye. She connected us to Taylor, a lawyer who handled exploitation cases. Marcus connected us to an eating disorder specialist in Nashville. Mom arrived with a performance ready to go, but the staff had been briefed. Access restricted. She tried to shove her way in. Security guided her out. Her voice echoed down the hall, ungrateful. Manipulated. Stolen from me. Me. Not my daughter. Me. 2 weeks of careful refeeding. 2 weeks of Zara's body relearning trust. 2 weeks of law and logistics. Taylor dug into the money and found rot. Credit cards in Zara's name maxed. Contracts giving Mom more than any manager should ever touch. Sponsorship cash diverted into personal improvements that all landed on Mom's body and in Mom's liquor cabinet. We filed reports for identity theft and financial abuse. Mom retaliated with lies. Posts as Zara claiming I'd kidnapped her. Cropped clips from when we were small, edited to frame me as jealous. The worst was when she posted the hospital name and begged fans to help. The nurses moved Zara to a secure room. That night, a panic attack pinned my sister to the bed until they sedated her. Watching her fight for breath while alarms chirped in the dim light, I felt something cold and bright lock into place inside me. I stopped playing defense. With Zara's permission, I filmed a single unedited video on a new, clean account. No filters. No background music. Just Zara, pale and honest, feeding tube taped to her cheek, bruises laddering her arms, heart monitor blinking. She spoke. About years of pretending. About Mom's control. About the numbers that ate her life. She asked for privacy and offered a lifeline to anyone who recognized their own reflection in her eyes. It spread. People who had adored the character recognized the human. A Mom ex emerged with texts where Mom bragged about milking pathetic fans. Old acquaintances admitted they'd seen too much and said nothing. Brands issued statements and backed away, suddenly allergic to the smoke they'd danced in. Mom returned with a lawyer, waving manager authority. Taylor had already filed emergency motions to sever every paper chain. Security walked Mom out again while she screamed about betrayal and filmed the ceiling on her way through the automatic doors. When Zara stabilized enough to leave the hospital, home was a question mark. Not the trailer. Not my crowded dorm room. Ms. Patel offered a small mother-in-law suite behind her house, quiet, safe, cheap. We moved Zara in with 2 suitcases and a bag of meds. Mom showed up drunk at noon and howled from the lawn about ungrateful children. We had a temporary restraining order by then. She ignored it. The police didn't. Watching her leave in the backseat of a cruiser tasted like metal. Not joy. Not vengeance. Just the absence of dread. Money was a mess. Most of it bled out into surgeries and status. Some brands paid settlements when they saw the truth. Not enough, but enough to cover treatment. Zara deleted everything. Pages, archives, drafts. Silence felt like breathing. On weekends, I drove down to Ms. Patel's and sat with Zara through meals. She cried sometimes just eating toast. She kept going. Therapy dug out old roots. Dr. Olivia rebuilt her relationship with food, step by terrified step. Dr. Matthew named what had happened coercion, financial exploitation, psychological abuse, a digital twist on Munchausen by proxy. In family sessions, we said the quiet things out loud. I admitted I hated myself for leaving. Zara admitted she hated me for escaping. We cried. We kept showing up. The hate didn't stand a chance against time and truth. A letter from the court announced Mom's sentence: 3 years, mandatory treatment, 5 years probation after, permanent restraining order. We didn't go to the hearing. We went hiking. Zara slipped in mud and laughed until she gasped. I took a picture for us, not for anyone else. We visited the trailer once before it was condemned. It was a husk. Under a floorboard, a photo album from before the content era. Melting ice cream on our faces. Grass stains, not staged pratfalls. For a second, the past felt soft. Then it stung. We took the album and left the rest to the bulldozer. Oregon called us both like a clean page. A small college with a calm counseling center. Zara applied to art. I transferred into social work. We rented a crooked little apartment, adopted a loud orange cat, and named him Phoenix because subtlety was dead. Zara sketched at the kitchen table raw self-portraits with honest eyes. I learned how to listen without planning my defense. One evening, Zara showed me her recovery journal, ate a full meal. Didn't check the scale today. Told Dr. Matthew about the hidden bathroom camera. The words stopped me. Hidden camera. She nodded. Mom had installed tiny lenses to keep her honest. Never posted publicly. Used as a leash. Proof to play back when shame was required. The next day, an email arrived from an anonymous account. Dozens of video files. Your mother saved these on my cloud. I can't be part of this anymore. A former friend. I opened one and felt sick. Private moments ripped open. Coaching on purging. Lectures on hiding food. Scripted lies for doctors. We looped in Taylor and a digital forensics expert. We preserved only what we needed to prove the crimes, and even that felt like handling broken glass with bare hands. We took the selected clips to the police. Officer Brenda listened like a professional and a person. She opened a new case, child endangerment for footage from before 18, stalking for after, and more. We moved temporarily to Denise's parents' house, empty, alarmed, watched over by a retired cop next door. The officers found Mom in a motel with printouts of Zara's photos, a binder of our schedules, and pills that weren't hers. They added charges and held her without bail. The quiet that followed felt unreal. Zara gained weight. Her hair stopped shedding. She slept through the night sometimes. She enrolled for spring classes. I got an internship at a family advocacy center. We learned the shape of ordinary days. A fan tracked down her email and wrote that Zara's hospital video had helped them get out of their own cage. Zara cried, then answered gently to say she was building a life off camera. It sparked a thought, not a return, but a mission. She started volunteering at a youth center, teaching art and whispering hard truths about contracts and control to kids who needed to hear them. Around 1 year free, a letter came from Mom via Taylor. Apologies. Treatment. Requests for contact. Our therapist said we didn't owe any response. We folded the letter away. Maybe someday. Not today. We celebrated what mattered. Zara's longest stretch without behaviors. My name on the dean's list. A tiny party with Denise and Marcus visiting. Zara showed her series, Unfollow, portraits of herself at different weights and truer selves. Her professor urged her to submit to a student show. She said she'd think about it. That night on our tiny balcony, we watched stars and admitted the silliest fears. She'd gone a week without checking corners for lenses. I still flinched at phone unlock sounds. Healing is a long road with blisters. We were walking it. Do you ever miss it? I asked. The attention? I miss feeling like I mattered, she said. But that wasn't real. They didn't know me. They knew Mom's edit. You matter to me, I said. The real you. She squeezed my hand. You matter to me. Thanks for coming back for me. The next morning, she made breakfast. Real food. Real hunger. Phoenix yelled like a tiny orange landlord. Light pooled across our chipped counter. I watched my sister hum and played eggs, and I thought, we didn't get our childhood back. But we got a life. Ours. Lesson learned? Love that demands you shrink yourself isn't love. Fame that feeds on your body will starve your soul. Family can break you, and you can still build a new one from kind neighbors, one stubborn counselor, a relentless lawyer, a couple of friends who answer at 2 a.m., and a cat who refuses to be quiet. We didn't win a prize. We claimed a life. And it's better than applause. It's ours. The night after Zara's video went viral, I slept in a hospital chair with my shoes on. I woke up every time a monitor beeped or a nurse pushed the door with her hip. When I did sleep, my dreams stuttered, camera shutters popping in the dark, Mom's voice narrating over the sound of rushing water. Every time I jolted awake, I checked the chair across from me to make sure Zara was still breathing. She was. Barely. But she was. Morning rounds felt like a parade of soft voices and serious eyes. Dr. Olivia leaned against the counter and explained refeeding again, patient and calm, like she'd say it as many times as we needed. Slow increases. Small portions. Electrolytes every hour. We are not just feeding a body, we are building tolerance after famine. She looked at Zara like she was a person, not a project. That alone felt like medicine. Zara kept apologizing. For the beeping. For the time. For existing in a way that made work for other people. I told her the same sentence on loop. You don't have to apologize for being alive. Sometimes she nodded. Sometimes she looked away. Recovery, I was already learning, is a series of conversations where the body says one thing and the brain hisses another. By lunch, Taylor had set up a conference room near the cafeteria. They spread papers across the table like a map of all the ways a person can be stolen without anyone laying a hand on them. Contracts. Email threads. Management agreements, where Mom paid herself like a celebrity agent and a hedge fund had a baby. Here, Taylor said, tapping a clause. This is how she trapped you: exclusivity, perpetual license, unilateral control of accounts. Their voice held no judgment. Only precision. We'll cut every thread. Mom posted a family statement that afternoon, the kind written with the voice of a martyr and the grammar of a brand. We are heartbroken to see lies spread by jealous people using Zara's image for attention. The comments split like cells, half of them calling me a monster, the other half saying the word that had followed us since we were kids, finally. The hospital installed a security guard outside Zara's door full-time. He had gentle eyes and a crossword folded in his back pocket. Name's Earl, he said. I'll be around. He introduced himself to Zara like a neighbor. She managed a shy hi between sips of a chalky supplement drink. Later, when her hands shook so hard she couldn't steady the straw, Earl pretended to need help with a clue, so I'd have a reason to lean in and hold the cup without making it a scene. That night, Dr. Matthews sat in the recliner and asked if he could tell us a story about power. He explained how control works, how it isolates and rewards, how it punishes and rebrands punishment as love. He spoke about double binds and learned helplessness, about the way our brains will burn a path to the familiar even if the familiar is killing us. Zara stared at the edge of her blanket. I stared at a scuff on the baseboard. When he finished, he said, "You survived by adapting. Now you get to adapt to living." I stayed quiet until he left because my throat was tight enough to sing high notes. Then I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and cried into a paper towel like I could mop up the past with it. The second week in the hospital, Taylor brought a woman named Geneva, digital forensics. She wore her hair in a twist and talked to us like colleagues. "Here's what we do," she said, sliding a laptop closer. "We verify file origins without ingesting the content we don't need. We hash the files, capture metadata, and select a legally sufficient subset." She looked at Zara. "You control what is seen. Not me. Not the prosecutor. You." Zara nodded and folded both hands around a styrofoam cup like it might keep her from shaking apart. When Geneva left, I walked to the parking lot to breathe air that hadn't passed through a filter. Miss Patel was waiting by my car, holding a paper bag that smelled like cinnamon and hope. "Breakfast muffins," she said. "The kind you ate in 8th grade before the science fair." I laughed. It came out wet. Miss Patel didn't say, "I'm proud of you." She didn't have to. It lived in the way she pressed the bag into my hand, and in the way she scanned the lot like a mother guarding a nest. Back upstairs, Zara was asleep, a monitor tracing slow green mountains across the screen. I sat on the windowsill and ate a muffin with my knees pulled up like a kid. For a second the taste transported me, posters curling on the classroom walls, the smell of new markers, the sound of a Bunsen burner clicking to life. Then a monitor chirped, and I was back in a sterile room watching the woman who used to share my cereal try to stay. Mom tried to visit again, this time armed with a clipboard and a voice that sounded like corn syrup. "I'm her manager and legal guardian." Taylor, who had been waiting in the lobby with the patience of a cliff, stood and said, "Guardian of a 19-year-old adult?" Mom blinked, then sneered. "She is vulnerable." "Yes," Taylor said. "And that's why you don't get within 50 feet of her." Security escorted Mom out while she narrated to the phone she couldn't stop filming with, "They're kidnapping my child." Outside, a car horn honked too long. It echoed in my bones. When Zara was finally discharged, everything felt fragile. The nurse handed me a binder thick enough to stun an ox, meal plans, warning signs, appointment schedules, lab slip after lab slip. "Refeeding syndrome risk remains," she emphasized. "If nausea spikes, if dizziness increases, if heart palpitations return, back to us, no hesitation." Zara signed a form with a hand that trembled less than last week and more than tomorrow. Ms. Patel's mother-in-law suite turned out to be a little square of peace. One room, a tiny kitchenette, a bathroom with a window that looked at a maple tree instead of a neighbor's fence. We pushed Zara's bed against the wall under that window, so she could wake up to leaves instead of numbers. I taped a note over the mirror. "You are not data." The first grocery run was a test in exposure therapy. Fluorescent lights. Endless aisles. Packages screaming about protein and purity. Zara stood frozen by the yogurt and whispered, "Which one is the right one?" "The one you want," I said softly. "Not the one you're supposed to prove something with." She stared at the blueberry cups for a full minute before putting 2 in the cart like she was stealing back a small piece of herself. We built routines with training wheels. Breakfast at 9, the same bowl 3 days in a row until it felt safe, then a tiny variation. Walks around the block at sunset. TV that wasn't about bodies. Coloring books like we were 8, not because we couldn't handle adult life, but because our nervous systems needed the kindness of easy wins. Some days Zara floated, present and playful. Some days she sank. She'd hold a fork for 10 minutes without eating because her brain was screaming. On those days, we ate together like it was a team sport. "One bite for me," I'd say. "One bite for you." Once, midway through a sandwich, she burst into tears so fast she choked. I grabbed a glass of water and rubbed slow circles on her back. She gasped, "Why does bread feel like a threat?" I said the sentence that had become my compass, "Because someone taught you it was." The first panic attack at Ms. Patel's hit around 2 a.m. Zara woke up, convinced she heard a lens adjusting. I flicked on the lamp and we searched the room with methodical hands. Curtains. Lamp base. Smoke detector. Air vent. Nothing. I unscrewed the vent cover anyway and held it up like proof. We sat on the floor with our backs to the bed frame until her breath returned. Ms. Patel crept in with tea like she had silenced her slippers in a former life. "My mother always said the worst ghosts live in our heads," she whispered. "But she also said our heads are the best places to learn to evict them." The legal case moved like molasses poured uphill. Taylor warned us, the law takes its time. The day the anonymous email hit my inbox, it felt like time snapped. I stared at the subject line, "I can't be part of this," and my heartbeat found the old fast rhythm I thought I'd left in the hospital. The files made me nauseous. I forwarded them to Geneva and called Taylor. We arranged chain of custody like we were planning a heist where the prize was dignity. At the police station, Officer Brenda met us with coffee and the kind of listening face that made you keep talking. We watched exactly what we had agreed to watch. When Brenda paused the video and said, "We have enough," My lungs finally expanded all the way. We'll build more, she added. But for now, you've done your part. On the drive back to Ms. Patel's, Zara pressed her forehead to the window and whispered, she really was always watching. She isn't now, I said, and meant it as a promise I intended to keep. Mom's motel arrest with the binder of schedules felt like a grotesque parody of a tour manager's folder. The charges multiplied. The plea offer came. We chose the path that spared Zara the courtroom spectacle because if the past had taught us anything, it was that a camera pointed at you does not make you safe. After sentencing, life didn't turn golden. It turned possible. That's less cinematic but more sustainable. The first time we ate at a diner, Zara stared at the laminated menu like it contained landmines. I suggested pancakes. She nodded like she wanted to be the kind of person who could eat pancakes in public. The stack arrived drenched in butter and sunlight. She cut one small square and put it in her mouth with the seriousness of a vow. I kept my eyes on my coffee until she swallowed. Then she smiled. Not a big smile. One that moved at the corners like a door opening on newly oiled hinges. I started dreaming in future tense. Not headlines. Not counts. Moments. A picnic blanket that didn't need to be filmed. A bookshelf with cookbooks that didn't proselytize. A calendar with art show dates circled in blue. I applied for an internship at a family advocacy center and wrote my cover letter like a person who finally knew what she wanted to learn. They called me in. The woman who interviewed me asked what moved me toward social work. I told her the truth. I used to think attention was safety. Now I think safety is attention paid on purpose to someone's actual needs. Zara's therapist introduced exposure homework that sounded ridiculous until it worked, eating a fear food in the afternoon sun on the porch, taking a mirror down for a week and replacing it with a postcard from the coast, wearing a comfortable outfit on a day when the plan in her head said she had to earn discomfort. Some days, she cursed him in the car. Some days, she surprised herself and didn't. The first relapse happened on a Tuesday because of course it did. We were halfway through a grocery run when a brand rep recognized Zara, not as a person, but as a former product. You look so different, she said brightly. But I mean that in a good way. Have you considered documenting a comeback? The redemption arc would slaughter. She laughed like her joke made money when it walked into a room. Zara went glassy. I stepped between them with a smile sharp enough to cut. She's not a storyline, I said. She's a human being. The rep blinked. Well, sure, of course, she stammered, but think of the awareness. We are, I said, softer now because I could see the panic in Zara's eyes blooming like a bruise. We're thinking about awareness of boundaries. I steered us to the cereal aisle and let Zara choose the loudest, sugariest box like we were 7, and this was a victory parade. We made it to the car before she broke. I held her while she shook and hiccuped and said, I'm sorry, over and over until she ran out of breath. You don't have to be sorry for being triggered by a past that trained you to panic, I murmured into her hair. You just have to breathe until the present wins. That night, she wrote a page in her recovery journal titled Tuesday. Bullet points in her neat handwriting, got recognized by a rep, wanted to run. Didn't. Bought cereal I like. Ate a bowl with marshmallows. Laughed at the blue milk. Did not throw up. Went to bed exhausted. Woke up anyway. A month later, she stood in Ms. Patel's kitchen holding a paintbrush like a microphone and asked, Do you think I should apply to an art program? Ms. Patel didn't answer with a speech. She walked to the fridge, took down a magnet shaped like a tomato, and clipped a blank application under it. I think you just did, she said. We researched programs like we were planning a heist where the prize was a life. We needed small classes, student health services that didn't treat mental health like an elective, financial aid that didn't require selling our souls again. Oregon kept clicking into place, campus photos with more trees than ego, a counseling center that answered the phone on the first ring, an art building that smelled like clay and ambition instead of ring light heat. Applying meant writing about the years she wanted to forget. Zara sat on the floor with drafts and cried all the salt that had been wrung out of her. I hate that this is my story, she said. I hate that I have to touch it to move past it. I knelt and put my forehead against hers. You don't have to love the material to write your way out of it, I said. You just have to refuse to let someone else edit the ending. When the acceptance email came, she made a sound I hadn't heard since we were kids, a gasp that flipped into a giggle. We screamed. Miss Patel clapped like church. Denise FaceTimed from our couch and ugly cried. Marcus held up a sign he'd clearly drawn in 5 frantic minutes. Go, Zara. Phoenix, the cat we didn't have yet, did not exist to me at that moment, and I missed him anyway. The week before we moved, Miss Patel sat us down at her dining table with 3 envelopes. Rent deposit, she said, sliding the first over. Groceries for the first month, she said, tapping the second. Art supplies, she said, patting the third. I opened my mouth to protest. She raised a hand. You two paid me back the day you told the truth. Let me do what I can without arguing with me when I'm trying to feel useful. We didn't argue. We cried. We hugged her until my ribs popped. The Oregon apartment was small and bright, with a kitchen window that framed the mountains like a painting. The first night, we ate takeout on the floor and listened to our neighbors laugh through the wall. It didn't bother me. It made me feel like we were inside a city's heartbeat. We picked up Phoenix from the shelter the next day, a skeletal orange cat with a voice like a squeaky door. The volunteer handed him to us with a wry smile. He's loud but loyal, she said. He'll tell you when he's hungry and when he's happy. Sometimes at the same time. Perfect, Zara said, kissing his forehead. Classes started. My first day at the advocacy center felt like stepping into a room where people speak your first language after years of translating yourself. Intake forms. Safety plans. The quiet, practiced way survivors tell you their story out of order and hope you'll organize it without smashing it. I learned to ask, what would make you feel safest right now, and then shut up and listen. Zara's first critique terrified her more than any surgery had. She hung her series, Unfollow, on a white wall that smelled like paint thinner and possibility. Her classmates circled. One boy said he liked the raw aesthetic. Zara stared at him and said, evenly, that's my skeleton you're calling aesthetic. The professor cleared his throat and steered them all to language that honored the work and the person who made it. After class, the boy apologized in a halting voice that made me think he might be learning empathy for the first time. It's okay, Zara said, and meant it's a start. We built new rituals. Saturday morning farmers markets. Tuesday therapy. Thursday art lab until midnight. Sunday meal prep like a love letter to the week ahead. We hosted tiny dinners, the kind where you lock your phone in a drawer and an hour disappears while you laugh about nothing. We learned which thrift store had the good mugs. We learned the bus schedule by heart. We learned we could have a bad morning and still have a good night. One evening, Zara opened her email and went still. What? I asked, bracing. A fan found me, she said, but her voice held no fear. She turned the screen. The message was simple and careful. I recognized pieces of myself in your hospital video. I got help. I am safe now. Thank you. Tears collected and spilled. Not despair. Relief. Should I reply? She asked. Only if you want to, I said. She wrote back 2 sentences and closed her laptop like she'd just performed a sacred task. That email planted a seed. Zara started sketching a workbook, plain language, messy margins, circles for notes, about boundaries and money and bodies and internet traps. She titled it Human First. She didn't intend to publish it. She intended to put it in the hands of a kid in a back row somewhere who needed a friend who had been through the fire and lived. One afternoon, a brand rep, different from the grocery store, reached out to me at the center. Not about Zara, just ignorant. We want to do an awareness campaign, she said. Partner with survivors, maybe some before and after shots. Very tasteful, no, I said. Pay survivors to shape your policy and never post their pain as content. She blinked like I'd spoken an unfashionable dialect. We could do a heartfelt video. No, I sent her a list of local orgs with training programs and wrote a paragraph about how performative allyship harms the people it pretends to help. She didn't write back. I didn't care. Around the 1-year mark, a letter came from the prison. Apology. Treatment. I am learning. Requests for contact. We took it to therapy, then took it home and put it in the drawer where we kept warranties and things you don't throw away but don't look at every day. We lit a candle and made dumplings and ate them too fast and burned our tongues. It felt like choosing light on purpose. Setbacks still happened. Zara caught a stomach bug in winter and her brain, that old bully, whispered, "See? Food is dangerous." We rode out 3 days of nausea without letting the scale into the room. When she was better, we celebrated with a grilled cheese so golden it looked staged, then laughed because nothing in our kitchen would ever be staged again. One spring afternoon, I came home and found Zara on the porch painting a small square of wood the color of sunrise. "For Miss Patel," she said. A thank you that fits in her palm. I sat on the step and watched her hand steady. "Have you thought about the exhibit?" I asked. She blew out a breath. "I'm thinking. We can stand far away and watch people watch your work," I said. "And if anyone says something like raw aesthetic, I will sneeze loudly in their direction." She laughed. "Deal." The exhibit was in a room that felt like a hush with lights. Zara wore boots that made her 2 inches taller and a jacket she found at a thrift store for $6 that made her look like every version of herself had layered into one person. People moved slowly in front of Unfollow, reading the captions. Some cried. Some didn't. Both were fine. A girl with a shaved head and a cracked phone case approached Zara and said, "Thank you for putting a face to the thing my mother keeps calling a phase." They hugged like survivors do, a little too long, then with relief when they both exhaled. On the way home, we stopped for tacos. Zara ordered something messy on purpose. She took a bite and closed her eyes like a prayer. I watched the salsa drip and felt the old fear lift 1 more inch off our shoulders. A week later, a packet arrived from Taylor, accounting summaries, a check, a letter. Final distribution, it read. It will never be what it should have been, but it is what is left. We sat at the table and stared at the number. It was big enough to matter, small enough to be maddening. We decided to use part for a scholarship fund in Ms. Patel's name, earmarked for students who had survived exploitation and wanted education more than exposure. "Call it the Tomato Magnet Fund," I said. Zara snorted and agreed. We learned how to argue without the room turning into a courthouse. The first blow-up was about laundry because of course it was about laundry. I snapped about damp towels. She snapped about the way I stacked bowls. 20 minutes later, we sat in the quiet and realized we were reenacting a house where mistakes earned punishment. We apologized and put our hands on the same towel and wrung until water dripped onto a floor we'd mopped ourselves. It felt like an exorcism of something small and sticky and old. Phoenix got fat, which felt like a family miracle. He sprawled across Zara's sketchbook like a living paperweight. When he knocked a glass off the table, we didn't film it. We cleaned it up and guffawed like idiots and Googled how to discourage cats from parkour. The internet said, "You don't." In late summer, I sat across from a teenage client at the advocacy center who wore her hoodie like armor. "He says if I leave, he'll tell everyone I'm crazy," she muttered. "He says no one will believe me." I told her exactly what Zara had told me in a half-lit backyard the morning she slipped out in an oversized hoodie. "Abusers love to hold your credibility hostage. It's how they keep you." I handed her a list. "Here's who will believe you. And here's a phone that's yours." On the 1-year anniversary of Zara's hospital video, we didn't post anything. We went to the coast. We bought a kite shaped like a fish and ran like little kids until the string burned our fingers and the wind laughed in our hair. "Look," Zara shouted over the roar, pointing at the sky, "something that flies that isn't made of me." I nodded and felt the truth settle somewhere in my sternum. That night, on the balcony, she asked the question she still asks in a dozen different ways. "Do you think there's a version of this where we forgive her?" I answered the way I always do, maybe. When forgiveness would be for us, not for her. When it wouldn't cost you. She traced a line on the concrete with her toe. "Okay," she said. "Then not yet." 2 days later, we received another letter through Taylor. Mom had completed another program. She wrote about childhood pains of her own like a ledger balance too late. She said, "Let me make amends." We took the letter to therapy. Dr. Matthew said, "Boundaries are not punishments. They're architecture." We decided our architecture required distance. We mailed the letter back to the drawer. Zara's Human First handbook became a real thing in a real binder with tabs you could flip and worksheets you could scribble. She brought it to the youth center, and the kids passed it around like contraband wisdom. One girl asked if she could keep it. "It's yours," Zara said, and the girl hugged it to her chest like a life jacket. On a cold Wednesday afternoon, Ms. Patel called. "I found a box in the back of the school storage room," she said. "It has your names on it." We drove back the next weekend. In the box, crumpled science fair ribbons, a clay bowl with a thumbprint dent, a tiny sweatshirt with glitter that read "Princess of the Playground." Zara held up the bowl and laughed. "I made this," she said, astonished. "I forgot I knew how." We took the bowl home and put it on the counter. We put peaches in it in summer and clementinas in winter. Every time we reached for fruit, we reached for a proof. The day we finally visited the student exhibition where Unfollow hung, a woman in her 40s stood in front of Zara's self-portrait, the one where she had painted her eyes too honest to be stylish, and whispered, "I am so tired of being pretty." Zara stood beside her and said, "Me too." The woman nodded, wiped her cheek, and said, "So let's be something else." It felt like a manifesto whispered in a museum. We still had nights that went sideways. A fire alarm shrieked at 3 in the morning and sent Zara right back to a bathroom with a lock on the wrong side. We sat on the kitchen floor until the adrenaline crawled out of our blood. I poured cold water over my wrists because Ms. Patel taught me to. Zara counted the lines in the tile because Dr. Matthew taught her to. When the alarm stopped, we laughed at how ridiculous our hair looked at 3:18 a.m. under bad lighting. We went back to bed and slept like we'd outrun something heavy. In my internship, a supervisor named Lila taught me the sentence I would carry into 1,000 rooms. "What happened to you makes sense of your reactions. What you do next is where we work." I wrote it on a post-it and stuck it to our bathroom mirror above the "You are not data" note. We left both up. Some mornings one spoke louder than the other. It was fine. The mirror could handle the chorus. We visited Denise and Marcus twice that fall. We cooked in a too-small kitchen and argued about board game rules and watched Zara fall asleep with Phoenix on her lap and a pencil still in her hand. In those moments, I felt a surge of gratitude so sharp it almost hurt. Not for the trauma, we will never be grateful for that. For the people who circled us when the waters rose, the teacher with muffins, the lawyer with perfect clauses, the cop with the listening face, the roommate with a spare bed, the friend who answered the phone at 2:03 a.m. The cat who demanded breakfast at dawn like a metronome for living. A year and a half after sentencing, we got notice. Mom had earned early access to a restorative program inside the prison. "Would you participate?" the coordinator asked in a careful voice. We discussed it with every person in our circle, slept on it, and decided no. Not because people cannot change. Because our healing did not require watching her try. We sent a letter. "We hope you continue your work. We are continuing ours. Do not contact us outside legal channels." We meant it as a boundary and a blessing for her to do better somewhere we were not. The next spring, Zara stood on a stage at a community center with a slide deck titled Human First, a guide to keeping yourself in a world that wants your image. She spoke in a voice that was soft but carried. She didn't tell her whole story. She told exactly enough to make the material credible and then moved the spotlight off herself onto the kids in the folding chairs. After, a boy with bitten nails asked how to know if someone is managing you or grooming you. Zara answered like she was talking to our old selves. Management asks how to support your goals. Grooming tells you your goals. Management makes you bigger. Grooming makes you small. We drove home in the dark. The mountains looked like sleeping giants. "How do you feel?" I asked. Zara put her feet on the dash like a rebel and said, "Alive." Then she laughed. "And hungry." We stopped for fries. We ate them in the parking lot. No one filmed us. No one watched. The oil stained the paper bag. The night air smelled like pine and salt. I rested my head on the seat and closed my eyes. I still check the locks twice sometimes. Zara still counts steps when she's anxious. We still keep the scale in a box at the back of the highest closet where you'd need a chair and a bad decision to reach it. We still have a drawer for letters we're not ready to read. We still call Ms. Patel on Sundays and listen to her tell us about her garden like weather can be a language for hope. People sometimes ask what the lesson is, like they're collecting fortune cookies. Here's mine. If love requires you to erase yourself, it isn't love. If a camera asks for your pain in high definition, it isn't care. If safety feels like silence, check who gets to keep talking. Choose the room where you are a person and not a product. Build that room if it doesn't exist. Barricade it with boundaries. Fill it with the kind of attention that feeds life, not the algorithm. We didn't shorten our story to fit any platform. We made our life too wide for any lens to hold. And we're still walking it, slow when we need to be, fast when we can be, together on purpose. The scholarship started with a joke and a tomato magnet. We sat at the table with Taylor's final check and a pen that ran out of ink halfway through. Ms. Patel. Zara laughed, grabbed a bright red marker, and wrote Tomato Fund in block letters across a sheet of paper. It stuck. We called the community college, scheduled a meeting, and walked into an office that smelled like coffee and copy paper carrying nothing but a concept and a promise. Money reserved for students who had been treated like products and wanted to become people with degrees. The dean listened. Really listened. He asked questions that didn't feel like hoops. How will applicants prove their experiences without re-traumatizing themselves? What support can we tie to the funding so it isn't just a check? We left with a plan: tuition for 2 students a year, plus a stipend for therapy and a dedicated advisor trained in trauma-informed practices. Ms. Patel cried when we told her. You too, she said, hands at her heart, are turning a wound into a window. We hosted a tiny launch in the library, no microphones, no brand wall, just a table with name tags and a plate of brownies. Zara spoke for 3 minutes. She didn't perform. She didn't confess. She explained. This fund is not charity. It is restitution, rerouted and multiplied. If you receive it, you haven't been chosen because you were broken. You've been chosen because you are building. The first 2 recipients hugged her like they were steadying themselves on a railing. One wore a work uniform and smelled like fryer oil. The other carried a sketchbook. Both left with folders, contact numbers, and a promise they could call on bad days. We meant it. Summer stretched out like a warm elastic band. The coast was crowded with tourists, and we were not ready for that noise, so we made our own rituals inland. Early morning hikes. Late-night grocery runs when the aisles were empty and the fluorescent lights felt less like interrogation. Park picnics with sandwiches that dripped. Fridays at the thrift store. Sundays with Ms. Patel on speaker while we cooked her recipes slightly wrong in another state. Then Ms. Patel asked, carefully, if we would consider coming back to Tennessee for a weekend, on our terms, with her spare room ready, with no visits, beyond the people we chose. We said yes because it felt like a test we wanted to ace, not because anyone demanded it. The morning we left, Zara stared at her reflection and said, if I see that bathroom door, I might throw up. I said, if you throw up, we leave. If you don't, we leave. Either way, we leave. She smiled without showing teeth. Deal. The highway unspooled. We split playlists. We stopped at a gas station for gummy worms and terrible coffee that tasted like courage. Crossing the county line felt like walking into an old smell. We rolled down the windows anyway. Ms. Patel's porch light was already on when we pulled in. She hugged us like she was counting bones. You can bail at any moment, she said, before we stepped over the threshold. No questions. I will pack you sandwiches to go. Day 1. Safe errands. The library. The park. The bakery where we used to press our noses to the glass. We bought 2 cinnamon rolls and ate them in the car while the radio played a song we hated in middle school. We were so dramatic, Zara said, licking icing off her thumb. We had reason, I said. But also, yes. Day 2, the hard place. We drove past the trailer. Or what used to be the trailer. The lot was empty, just weeds and a rectangle of dirt, as if the house had been a tent someone rolled up. Neither of us spoke for a full minute. Then Zara breathed out a laugh that sounded like a sob's cousin. Haunted by nothing, she said. We parked anyway. We got out. We stood on the foundation ghost and said the names of the rooms aloud: kitchen, bedroom, prison, set, like we were performing a cleansing ritual. I pressed my palm to the air where the bathroom door used to be and whispered, "Not yours anymore." The wind moved. It felt like an answer. After, we stopped at the grocery store we used to hate. We walked the aisles just to prove we could. In produce, a woman by the peaches squinted at Zara. I felt my shoulders rise. She tilted her head. "You look familiar," she said. Then her face softened with recognition, but not the kind that makes your stomach drop. "You and your sister, you were always polite here." She smiled. "I'm glad to see you looking well." No cameras. No follow-up ask. Just a kindness, casual and complete. We thanked her and left with peaches that were still hard because life is not a movie. That night, at Ms. Patel's table, we told stories about the good parts we refused to surrender just because they happened near the bad. The time we got lost in the corn maze and Mom wasn't there to yank us out, and we found our way by following the sound of a high school marching band. The year Christmas lights were half off in January, and we bought a broken string and pretended our room was a planetarium. We toasted with lemonade. We slept without dreams. On the third day, the past tried to claw in again. A stranger DM'd the Advocacy Center's public email with a subject line that made my neck go tight, "Urgent about Zara." The message was short and slimy. "I know where she is. You should have thought twice before slandering her mother. People are watching." My hands didn't shake, they went cold. I forwarded it to Taylor and Officer Brenda with a single line, "New harassment." I blocked and deleted and then looked at Zara. "Do you want to see it?" I asked. "No," she said. "Do you?" "Also no," I said. We went for ice cream instead because sometimes the correct response to a threat is to feed your joy in public and keep your receipts. We also bought a motion sensor for Ms. Patel's back door because care and caution are not opposites. Back in Oregon, life resumed its steady beat. Zara's second-year schedule got harder. My internship turned into a job offer. We celebrated with tacos and watched a storm roll in over the mountains like a curtain being pulled. The doorbell rang. A delivery. A package with no return address. I stared at it like it might throb. "We open it together," Zara said. We did. Inside, a small wooden box and a printed card. The box was empty. The card read, "You keep pretending you can hide." We looked at each other and both felt the same thing at once, not fear, exactly. A tired, focused anger. We called the police. We filed the report. We asked the building to check cameras. Taylor looped in a victim's advocate in our city who met us for coffee and mapped out next steps. "Whoever sent this wants your nervous system," she said. "Don't give them your day." We put the box in an evidence bag, and then we went to class. We ate lunch. We fed the cat. We texted Ms. Patel a photo of a tomato at the farmer's market so red it looked fake. It wasn't ignoring. It was refusal. That night, Zara taped a note on our doorbell camera, "Smile. We're safe here." The next week brought balance. The scholarship recipients sent updates. One switched to nights at work and days at school and sent us a photo of her doing homework at a diner counter at 2 a.m., smiling like a lighthouse. The other changed majors from marketing to mechanical engineering because he said he was tired of selling and ready to build. We printed their emails and stuck them to the fridge under, you guessed it, the tomato magnet. Zara's human first workshops grew. Word of mouth. She kept them small. No viral clips. No panel performances. A dozen kids in a room, 2 hours of honest instruction about contracts, percentages, consent, and the difference between being seen and being used. She held up a slide that said, in giant letters, "No image is worth your nervous system." The first time, she cried while reading it. The second time, she didn't. The third, a girl in a denim jacket stood and said, "Say it again," and the whole room said it with her. It sounded like a spell. In therapy, Zara worked on something that sounds small and isn't, learning how to be bored. No crisis. No performance. Just an empty Sunday afternoon that didn't need to be optimized. She painted a series called Unscheduled. Drying socks on a chair. Sunlight on a floor. Phoenix sleeping in ridiculous positions. A bowl of cherries mid-wash. The frames were cheap. The colors were loud. They made me cry. "You're ridiculous," she teased, wiping my cheek with her thumb. "Yes," I said. And I would like to remain this way. Not everything was tidy. A cousin we hadn't spoken to in years posted a status about certain ungrateful girls who ruined a good woman's life. People commented with the foul certainty that comes free with distance. We didn't respond. Taylor sent a polite letter reminding them of the restraining order and the truth. The status disappeared. Our phones stayed dark. We watched a stupid movie and laughed until our sides hurt. The world did not tilt. Autumn turned the trees into a parade. We took a trip with Denise and Marcus to a cabin that had more board games than outlets. We taught them to make Ms. Patel's muffins. They taught us a card game with rules so unfair they were kind of perfect. On the second night, the power went out in a storm, and we sat by the fire telling future stories. Marcus wanted a dog that looked like it owed him money. Denise wanted a porch garden with too much basil. Zara wanted a studio with windows that faced east. I wanted a job where the phrase, "take your time," wasn't code for, "hurry up slow." We went to bed under wool blankets and slept like it was safe to dream. One morning, months later, a letter arrived from the state. Mom had completed another program. She would qualify for supervised release at the original date. The letter rattled me more than I wanted to admit. I carried it around the apartment, unsure which drawer deserved it. Zara took it gently from my hand, slipped it into a manila folder labeled legal, and slid it onto a shelf. Architecture, she said. Not avalanche. We made soup. We ate slow. We texted Officer Brenda a simple check-in, still safe. She replied 5 minutes later, always watching the right things. The day Zara mailed her application for a small grant to expand Human First, she picked up our old stuffed lion, the one who had smuggled documents and a phone and hope, and sewed up a seam that had been open for years. There, she said, pinching the fluff back into place. No more secrets in his belly. He retires. We put him on a shelf where the morning sun hits. Phoenix tried to push him off more than once. We moved him higher. Some elders deserve height. On my birthday, Zara gave me a framed print she'd made of 3 sentences in block letters. You are not data. You are not content. You are a person. We hung it in the hallway where we put our shoes on before hard days. The past still knocks. Sometimes it bangs. We've learned to check the peephole and speak through the door we built. You cannot come in, we tell it. You do not live here anymore. On our best days, we don't even get up. We look at each other, at Phoenix snoring, at the pile of art supplies on the table, at the tomato magnet holding a grocery list that reads peaches, bread, cinnamon, and we keep doing whatever we were doing. Breakfast. Homework. A nap. A laugh. Here's the truth we stand on now. Closure is not a slam. It's a seal. You press it and press it again until it holds. You reinforce it with mundanity and muffins and motion sensors and legal names on documents and people who answer when you call from parking lots. And then you live. Loudly some days. Quietly most. Like a person who escaped a machine and became a body again. The door is shut. And we are still here. Together. On purpose, the grant email came in at 6:12 a.m., right as the kettle started to sing. Subject line, Human First approved, with conditions. I stared long enough for the steam to fade and the screen to fog again. Then I yelled for Zara. She skid-slipped into the kitchen in socks, hair a comet, eyes already braced for disappointment. I turned the laptop. She read. Her mouth opened, then she did something I hadn't seen since we were small and the world still had recess. She jumped. 2 feet off the ground, both hands in the air, like joy had become a muscle that finally remembered how to fire. We spent the rest of the morning reading the fine print the way Taylor taught us, slowly, twice, with a pencil. The conditions were good ones: trauma-informed facilitators, capped attendance, opt-in privacy agreements we'd drafted ourselves. The grant wasn't asking us to become a spectacle. It was asking us to build a room where kids could be people first and participants second. We signed. We hit send. We made cinnamon toast. We fed the cat. We called Ms. Patel and put her on speaker while we planned a program that didn't devour the people inside it. The first Human First cohort met in a library community room that still smelled faintly of paste from the 90s. 12 chairs in a loose circle. A whiteboard with 3 sentences at the top. Your body is not a brand. Your story is yours to pace. No image is worth your nervous system. Zara didn't stand at a podium. She sat with us, ankles crossed, pencil in hand like she was still sketching her way through. She laid out the rules of engagement in a voice so calm it felt like a weighted blanket. You could step out any time. There were snacks that weren't traps. There was a quiet corner for breathing. There were no cameras. There would be resource lists and contracts translated out of legalese and into English. Halfway through the session, a kid in a denim jacket raised a trembling hand. What if the person hurting you is also the person paying your rent? Zara breathed in, breathed out. Then we build a bridge you can actually cross, she said, and slid a workbook forward, budgets, exit plans, phrases to use with managers who call control care. It doesn't have to be a jailbreak. It can be a series of Tuesdays. After, when the room emptied and the librarian stacked chairs with that oddly tender thunk, we sat on the floor eating the leftover granola bars like teenagers. I didn't shake, Zara said, surprised. Not once. You've been practicing for this for years, I said. You just didn't know what the job would be. An email arrived that night from a name we didn't expect, Justin, the ex who'd once shared screenshots of Mom bragging about milking fans. He wrote to Taylor first, then to us through Taylor, like someone approaching a dog who has reason not to trust. He'd entered a sobriety program and was trying to make amends in the places he'd failed loudest. I should have called the cops when I saw what I saw, he wrote. I told myself it wasn't my business. I was wrong. If you need testimony for anything still outstanding, civil, not criminal, I'm available. No press. No attention. We didn't need him legally anymore. But somewhere between anger and apathy, there's a small room called accountability. We took his statement. We thanked him without absolution. Sometimes an ally is just a person who finally stops being a bystander. As the calendar turned, the letter we'd been expecting finally came. Notice of Mom's release date. It wasn't a surprise. It still kicked my stomach like a mule. I brought the envelope inside like it contained something living and set it on the table between a bowl of cherries and Zara's sketchbook. Phoenix pawed at the corner. Zara tapped the paper with one nail once. She didn't open it. Let's make a plan before we read, she said. Architecture, not avalanche. We called a circle. Taylor. Officer Brenda. Dr. Matthew. Miss Patel. We built out a boring, beautiful fortress of logistics. Updated restraining order paperwork pre-filed, a safety plan that was mostly common sense and neighbors who knew our names, a list of numbers printed and taped inside the cabinet next to the tea. We changed routines we didn't care about. We kept the ones that fed us. We asked our landlord to replace the front door camera with a better model and gave them a very convincing lecture about crime prevention through environmental design that Marcus helped me write. We told exactly 2 friends outside the circle, Denise and Earl, the hospital guard who still sent crossword photos sometimes, and then we went for a walk and criticized the neighborhood hydrangeas like judgy aunties because the world was still here, and so were we. Only then did we open the letter. Release date in bold. A generic paragraph about re-entry services. A note that she'd be prohibited from contacting us. A P.O. box for legal correspondence only. No apology attached, no request, just bureaucracy in black and white. I felt my throat try to close and refused to let it. Okay, I said, out loud and very calm. Okay. We slid the paper into the legal folder. We made soup. We ate it at the table with the windows open and the evening traffic sounding like ocean. 2 weeks before the date, a package arrived addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize but felt in my bones. The weight was wrong for a typical threat. It thunked like paper heavy with ink. I texted Taylor a photo. Open on Zoom, they said. We did. Inside, a stack of contracts. Originals. Many with coffee rings, some with my sister's forged signature ghosting across the last page. On top, a note in a round, precise script. These are yours. I don't want them anymore. No name. No return address. But I knew the print. Martha, our old neighbor, the one who'd called the night Mom was breaking the trailer and the past apart. A person who had lived too close to the noise, who had probably rescued these from a trash bag or a file drawer she was afraid would be set on fire. We didn't need the contracts anymore, but Zara took them from me with a tenderness that surprised us both. Evidence of a life I survived, she murmured, and we decided to do something ceremonial that wasn't cruel. We borrowed a heavy, hungry shredder from the advocacy center and fed it one contract at a time in the backyard, under a sky the color of forgiveness we didn't owe. Not bonfire. Not drama. Work. Pages went in and teeth did their boring, blessed job. Phoenix supervised from the window with one disdainful ear tilted our way. When we finished, I poured the confetti into a compost bin. Paper to soil. Soil to tomatoes next summer. It felt, honestly, like religion. The night before Mom walked back into a world none of us could control, Zara and I drove to the coast. We didn't say we were running away. We said we were choosing our view. The beach was mostly ours, wind lifting the edges of our jackets, sky bruised at the horizon. We brought the old stuffed lion, the one we'd retired to a shelf, because rituals ask for witnesses. We didn't make speeches. We didn't spin up vows. We wrote 3 things on scrap paper and read them only to each other: what we feared, what we would do if it happened, what we were willing to let go of so it wouldn't eat us. We folded the papers and tucked them into the lion's mended seam, not secrets, not smuggled rescue phones this time, just promises we'd already said out loud. Then we threw a cheap plastic kite into the wind and ran until our lungs burned like we were 10 and 11 again, and the only algorithm was the weather. Morning came anyway. Release day was nothing. No knock. No message. No grand gesture forced on us. Just an email from Taylor confirming the system had done what the system does and that any contact outside legal channels would be a violation. We drank coffee. We watered the plant that refuses to die. I went to the center and sat with a teenager who'd brought a friend and the kind of courage you can hear when someone decides to say their truth. Zara led week 3 of her cohort and came home smelling like dry erase and cocoa. We made dinner. We watched a movie that would have bored our old followers and delighted our present hearts. The door stayed shut. The world didn't end. Safety, it turns out, often looks like unremarkable Tuesdays. The rest doesn't tie itself in bows. We still have setbacks. We still have nights where the past rumbles and the present tightens. Sometimes a smell knocks Zara sideways. Sometimes a client's story uncloaks an old ache in me. Sometimes a comment finds its way through the filters and jabs at scar tissue. These are not plot twists anymore. They're weather. We check the forecast, grab our jacket, and go anyway. The scholarship's first 2 students graduated in caps they decorated themselves. We took a photo that lives only on our fridge, Ms. Patel in the middle, beaming, the dean trying not to cry, Zara with paint on her fingers, me with a grin that looks, finally, unguarded. The Tomato Fund added a 3rd slot the next year. The kids started calling Ms. Patel Auntie P, and she pretended to be bothered while baking double batches. Human First grew in a way we could carry. No brand deals. No panels where we'd be asked to compress a decade into a soundbite. Just rooms filled with kids and caregivers and early career managers who wanted to learn how not to be predators. Zara built the curriculum like a quilt, pieces of law from Taylor, pieces of breath work from Dr. Matthew, pieces of budgeting from Ms. Patel's never-ending spreadsheets, pieces of my safety planning from the center. She added art prompts that didn't demand trauma to be good. She banned before and after slides. She printed the phrase "No image is worth your nervous system" on the last page of every workbook, big enough to tear out and tape to a mirror. My work became the thing I used to wish for in the dark. I sat with families at 2 a.m. and noon and the gap between, and we built proof and plans. I learned how to write affidavits that judges actually read. I learned that food helps when you're asking someone to hold a heavy truth. I kept a drawer at my desk full of granola bars and crackers and tea, offerings for nervous systems on high alert. I kept the phrase "what would make you feel safer right now?" behind my teeth like a blessing. Sometimes I think about the people who watched us when we were children and clapped, and I feel a heat in my chest that could boil water. Then I think about the ones who turned away from the show, who knocked on hospital doors, who brought muffins, who filed motions, who held cups to lips that couldn't hold a straw steady, who said the right word at the right time and changed the shape of a day. We don't owe the first group anything. We owe the second our thanks and our imitation. As for Mom, she exists where we do not. When mail arrives, Taylor reads it first. When an anniversary comes, our phones do not buzz. If she is learning, I hope she sticks with it. If she is not, it is not our job to stand there and watch. Boundaries are not a lack of compassion. They are compassion's scaffolding. The last time the past tried to get clever, it came as nostalgia. An old clip resurfaced on some compilation account. A tiny Zara, a tinier me, a prank that wasn't. The comments were what they always are, half jokes, half judgments, a smattering of, "Whoa, I remember this." A student sent it to Zara with a worried face emoji. "Are you okay?" the kid wrote. Zara replied with a heart and a link to Human First. Then she plugged in her headphones and kept painting sun on a floor, socks on a chair, Phoenix snoring like a saw through a forest. The clip scrolled on without us. We don't go back to the beach to make promises anymore. We go to eat sandwiches too big for polite conversation and to argue about whether that cloud looks more like a whale or a busted teapot. We don't shred contracts every month. We shred junk mail and the coupons we know we'll never use. We don't wake to check for lenses in the corners. We still glance sometimes. Then we laugh and turn off the light. If you need a lesson, here's mine, plain and unpretty. Survival is not spectacle. Healing is not linear. Love is not control. Safety is not silence. And family, the real kind, is not something you perform for strangers. It's something you practice with people who hand you water when you're choking on the past and say, "You don't owe an apology for being alive." We never got our childhood back. We got mornings. We got Tuesdays. We got a tomato magnet that holds grocery lists and scholarship names. We got a cat who yells. We got a teacher who answers the phone. We got a lawyer who writes sentences that hold like steel. We got each other, alive and ours. The camera doesn't get the last shot. We do. A small kitchen, a chipped bowl, steam off a mug, Zara humming over a canvas while I slide an intake form into a folder and Phoenix claims the sunspot like he paid the mortgage. No filters. No captions. No audience to feed. Just a door we built, shut and solid. A life we chose, open and wide. And the quiet, stubborn joy of staying.